Tiwanaku is a pre-Columbian archaeological site in western Bolivia, near Lake Titicaca, about 70 kilometers from La Paz, and it is one of the largest sites in South America. Surface remains currently cover around 4 square kilometers and include decorated ceramics, monumental structures, and megalithic blocks. Although the altitude of the ancient city remains is now about 3,850 meters, 14,500 years ago, it was a seaport city. Not only that, it was actually a colony of a great civilization. This may sound unbelievable, but I will start from the beginning to introduce this city. This city was a large colonial territory on the western continent of South America, known as the continent of Mu. If you want to know more about Mu, you can watch this video. The people of Mu had lived on this continent for a long time before they began to explore lands outside it. Expeditions were undertaken regularly to explore and research aspects of the planet. For these expeditions, they used flying ships, similar to what you call flying saucers. It was known that most of the planet was populated by black, yellow, and also white races, although the latter had regressed into a primitive state due to their loss of technical understanding right at the beginning. They had settled on a continent known to you as Atlantis, but, as much for material as spiritual reasons, their civilization failed completely. I must emphasize the following point. Prior to embarking on their exploratory expeditions of the planet, the inhabitants of Mu had conducted research by means of the Pyramid of Savanasa. As a result of this research, it was decided to send forth the flying ships and to colonize New Guinea and the southern Asiatic region, that is, all to the west of Mu. Simultaneously, they set up colonies in South America and Central America. Most importantly, they established a colonial base, which grew into a huge town, in the area known to our archaeologists as Tiwanaku, located not far from Lake Titicaca. The Andes did not exist at the time. The mountains formed some time later, as you will soon see. At Tiwanaku, an enormous seaport was built. In those days, North and South America were flat, and eventually a canal was constructed to link an inland sea, existing where Brazil is now, with the Pacific Ocean. This sea also had an outlet into the Atlantic Ocean, so that it was possible to pass from one ocean to the other, and so to colonize the continent of Atlantis. But I say they had flying ships. Why wouldn't they use them? If they pierced a canal, they must have intended to use boats. Because they used their flying machines just as we now use airplanes, but for very heavy loads, they used machines of anti-gravitation, exactly like the heavy vehicles are now used on Earth. So, as I said, they colonized the continent of Atlantis. Many white people from Atlantis preferred at the time to emigrate to the region of Northern Europe, as they didn't accept the new government and the new religion coming from Mu. These white people set off in their sea vessels propelled by steam and wind. Indeed, the white race had discovered steam power, having passed through a period you would call prehistoric. I must also explain that Britain was not an island at this time, as it was joined to Northern Europe, and the Straits of Gibraltar didn't exist either, as Africa reached to the south of Europe. Many white people from Atlantis emigrated to North Africa, mixing with the crossbred black-yellow race of the area. Interbreeding created new races in North Africa, which have perpetuated themselves over thousands of years, and which you know as Berbers, Tuaregs, and others. So, the people of Mu used Tiwanaku as a seaport to migrate to Atlantis. This seaport gradually developed into a large city. However, 14,500 years ago, a great disaster destroyed both Tiwanaku and the continent of Mu. The continent of Mu sank to the bottom of the ocean, and Tiwanaku was destroyed when the mountains suddenly formed. Naturally, This seaport city was no longer near the sea. If you want to learn more about this disaster, you can watch this video. We'll have a look at the coast here and the port of Tiwanaku when the disaster happened. In time, we've gone back to just prior to the first tremor. We were on the quays of the large seaport of Tiwanaku. It was night and a full moon lit up the land, although quite soon it would set. In the east, a faint lightening of the sky heralded the approach of dawn. All was quiet. Watchmen patrolled the quays, where numerous boats were moored. A few rowdy revelers were entering a building on which a small night light shone. We flew over the canal, where several ships could be seen heading in the direction of the inland sea, now Brazil. In the distance to the west, a loud explosion was heard, then another nearer. Still in the west, the sky began to glow. Closer still, amid much sharper explosions, we watched the eruption of a volcano that lit up the western sky for about a 30-kilometer radius. On the canal and in the port, we were aware of a feverish agitation as cries rang out and sirens sounded. The ground began to shake and rumble. 3 more volcanoes surged from beneath the surface of the ocean near the coast, only to be engulfed by the waters as quickly as they had appeared. At the same time, it caused a tidal wave of about 40 meters in amplitude to surge towards the coast with an infernal noise. Before it reached the town, however, the land beneath Tiwanaku began to rise. The port, the town, and the countryside beyond, a whole section of the continent, rose rapidly, blocking the assault of the waves. In order to see better, we rose higher. The cries of the people reached us as a Dantean screech. They were mad with panic, for they were rising with the town as though in a lift, and it seemed their ascent would never stop. The boats had been smashed to pieces on rocks hurled from the ocean. It seemed the earth was completely remodeling its shape. The town disappeared as thick black clouds rolled in rapidly from the west, showering the land with lava and ash, spewed from the volcanoes. 2 words of description came to mind at that moment: grandiose and apocalyptic. In the end, Tiwanaku was destroyed and the continent of Mu disappeared.